not with a lot of oomph, but we have oomph. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the April 17th Budget Commission meeting. I'm Katie Howard, your chair, and I will pass it on to Michael, our new executive director for the board, to get us started.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and call roll. Representing Educational District 1, we have Ms. Katie Howard.
Present.
Representing Educational District 2, we have Ms. Loretta Baldwin.
Present.
Representing Educational 3, at large seat 9, we have Ms. Jessica Johnson.
Present.
Also present this afternoon, we have representing Educational District 3, Dr. Ken Zeff.
Yes.
And representing Education District at large seat 8, we have Ms. Cynthia Briscoe Brown.
Hi.
And also present, we have our Madam General Counsel, Nina Gupta. Chair, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you so much. All right, moving right along, do I have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and then we need to adopt the minutes from the February 27th meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes from the February 27th meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Sorry, I will turn it right over to Dr. Bracken for today's presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we do have 3 agenda items for today. First, we'll start off by going through the presentation you received on Monday with the general fund. So not much has changed here, but we'll do a little bit more deep diving. I can take any more in-depth questions that you have. And we'll talk through our process to get general fund fully balanced before tentative adoption in just a couple of weeks. The bulk of today's presentation is going to be from our other fund managers, though. The general fund represents about 70% of your total budget, but 30% of your budget is made up from special revenue, SPLOST, school nutrition, student activity funds, other grants. So we do want to make sure that you have a comprehensive understanding of everything that will be presented to you in the tentative budget. So we'll hand off to those areas to present for the second portion, and then I'll come back up just to close us out and talk about next steps. So for the general fund, you saw this last night. I'll give a little bit more in-depth context for some of these numbers. So the local revenue, we are assuming a 4% increase across the board at Fulton County Digest. There is some variance in what we're assuming around residential and commercial values. The bulk of the increase here that gets us up to that 7% is continued increases in pilot payments, so our payment in lieu of taxes that have negotiated in our IGA with the city, and also the closeout of the Atlantic Station TAD, which will return about $16 to $17 million of local revenue back to the district for next year. So for the state, we had a call with Godot yesterday. We should have the QBE 26 numbers by the end of this week. So we are hopeful that very soon we'll have actual numbers dropped in for the state QBE numbers. For sure, I can tell you that this state number will increase by about 1.8, 1.9 million for new safety and security one-time grants that occurred in the current year. But those do have a spend date through July 2026. And to make sure that we're able to plan well with those, we've made the decision to not bring those in the current fiscal year, but instead incorporate those into the adoption for FY26. So you'll see that increase for the state allocation as well. The title transfer, that is our preliminary estimate. We do tend to be conservative in that estimate. That is the Title I transfer, so that's not the full Title I amount. You'll see our federal programs present a different number to you later on in their presentation, but this is the amount that we've actually moved into the school budgets and have, again, just kind of consolidated with their general fund dollars. It loses their federal identity when we do that, and schools are able to build their budgets with that $15 million built in. We do anticipate a Title I true-up once we have that real allocation, and that usually happens about the same time that we do leveling each year. fund balance. We did pick a $17 million allocation for that. To be transparent, I didn't want to present to you a 40-something million dollar gap when we do intend to use fund balance to help close that gap. However, the fund balance number, we will tweak that to get to zero. And we will likely use a bit more than that 17 or a bit less than that 17. It'll be an exact number when we bring to you the tentative adoption. But again, that is all contingent on where we actually land with that state revenue, where we land with local, and where we are able to get additional information around our expenditure cuts. Again, we have given departments till the end of day today to get any of their changes into OpenGov. And so that will let us know exactly where our expenditures line up. You might see some variance between this sheet and tentative adoption. But again, where we are kind of truing up some of these individual line items, and that will help us to close that final gap of about 5.87 million. We talked yesterday or Monday about how our recommendations to go ahead and put into OpenGov include forward funding the textbook adoption. So going ahead and using the QBE funding we brought to you on Monday for approval, the $3.1 million in current year TAD allocations that have come to us, some potential cushion within the school nutrition transfer to help fund those allocations in the current year. We are scrubbing our benefits, just making sure that we're using actual adoption rates for benefits. So while the benefit rate overall has increased, we do look at how many of our individual employees end up taking those benefits, and we adjust that rate accordingly, and we do believe we may have some cushion there. We have contingencies built into the district-wide of about $1 million. We'll pull that back down. We'll prorate some of the positions that we currently have set aside in the district-wide as placeholders. And again, I mentioned at the board meeting that we'll continue to review the utilities allocations and make some concerted efforts around how we can pull back utilities. So we're kind of rolling the dice with this one, assuming that we can get some cuts in utilities. And this would be something we would need to monitor very closely when we get to actual spend next year. So with that, I'll take any questions on the deep dives there.
Colleagues, I have one. Okay, and Ken. And Jessica, I'm sorry. So I'll say for now, worst case scenario, if we have to go above 17, I know you're still working on, obviously, getting feedback from departments. What would you anticipate that being? I mean, how much over 17 from fund balance?
Yeah, so the very limit that we can go to and still get to our 12.5% cap is closer to 19. It's a little over 19. But we are trying to, the 17 million as it is stated here against the current expenditure assumptions would be about 12.8% of fund balance remaining. So we don't want to go to the floor of 12.5 if we don't have to. But an additional 2 million could come to fund balance if needed.
Thank you for that, and knowing we want to be as conservative as possible. And then I'll just say personally, and I know there's been work within the board around our percentage and that being reduced. I'll go to my colleagues for questions. Ken?
Thank you for this, Dr. Bracken. It sounds like I know a lot of good work's happened to get from 100 to, you know, we're not the $5 million you can find in the couch cushions, but it's still, we've made a lot of progress. Can we make sure to include the fund balance reconciliation in every single report? Because it is something I do get questions about, and I'm trying to keep the mental math in my head. You now said 17 to 19, so that helps me understand it. I do know, I know we spoke before that you think we may come under this year, and so that I think will be helpful to see that movement. So if we can make that kind of a standing item, I think that would be helpful. And how any other projections around? I mean, maybe we'll get this as we hear the special funds. Like, what are we feeling about on the federal landscape as we think about Title I? I know you have some of the title transfer here. I know we're in good shape for 24, 25, but for 25, 26, are you hearing anything that causes you concern?
We haven't heard, I mean, all of it causes concern, like we're watching everything. But we're not hearing, right now, the title set-asides are protected. They're carved off from other grants. And so we're moving forward, the state is moving forward with assumptions around title allocations remaining relatively flat to the current year. And so you're seeing our conservative adjustment here. I believe this is closer to 85% of last year's allocation. So we're building some conservative estimates in with the hope that, we'll see that come back during the leveling process. But nothing in the crystal ball that is telling us that we would be losing title dollars going into next year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Cynthia?
Well, Ken already asked two of my questions, so I will make it. Can we go to the I think it's the next slide? That one, yes. Where it says other cuts not yet made. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? That's still a significant amount of money.
Sure.
And I know we've made a couple of passes at cuts. Can you give us an idea of what else is anticipated that's going to get us to that $18 million number?
Yeah, it's the itemized list below that 18 million. So,
Oh, okay.
and when
I
we say
misread.
not yet made, it's literally just not yet made in our OpenGov system. So we have the system that all of our reports and detailed financials are coming out of. And then we have our Excel sheets that I'm keeping off to the side where we're trying to balance. And so it's my recommendation that to the team that following this meeting, we'll go ahead and make these cuts in the system as well as any other reductions that we're hearing from central office. We'll go ahead and make some of those revenue adjustments that I mentioned, especially around state. And when we do get the state QBE, we'll make that in the system. And then that will help us get to what that final balancing amount will need to be.
Right, I'm sorry,
Nope.
I didn't read that as a total of the ones underneath, so
that's fine.
I apologize. Can you tell me what the fund balance currently stands at?
It's a little, the number that's coming into my head is 168 million, but I don't know if that's prior to the usage of fund balance that we're recommending here or before. To Ken's point, it's probably a helpful slide that we have in all of these presentations to just show beginning fund balance, what we're recommending for the current year and ending, which would be our beginning fund balance for next year as we're planning this out. So we'll make sure that we incorporate that into the tentative adoption materials we're putting together now.
All right, that's all I've got, thank you.
Jessica?
Thank you. And so I just wanted to clarify, I see the school reserves, but it's at zero. Can you just provide some clarification?
Yeah,
there?
we just want to make sure that you're aware of all those places that we still do have cushion contingencies and reserves built into the budget. And we do hold back 1% of the SSF allocation of schools. Hopefully, we can hold that back until the leveling process, but that is always on the table. Last year, we did have to dip into the reserves to close that final couple inches of the budget gap. And this year, we just want to show there is still 7.2 million tied up in school reserves. We're not recommending to use that at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So just reminders, what's governing our process and what we'll be bringing back to you in more detail for tentative adoption is the budget parameters for this year. For the revenue parameters, I'll call out specifically the one that says no less than 12.5%, but also a reminder to you guys, to ourselves, and to the public. Our goal is to build back to that 15% in the multi-year. And so next year, we're hoping to use nothing in fund balance. A balanced budget is our goal, and with a 2028 goal of starting to restore fund balance. And so as we begin to build out the multi-year, once we have a 2026 balanced budget, we'll strive to demonstrate how we will do that. The expenditure parameters, what you should expect to see at the tentative adoption is our strategies for how we've approached each one of these for the FY26 budget process. I'll briefly talk through where we've landed on each of these. In support of a compensation strategy, we're recommending a step increase for all employees. We are moving our compensation strategy more towards sustainable, recurring salary and less in the one-time stipend type expenditures, and so more is going into base salary. You saw big increases in base salary last year to support that initiative. This year, we're continuing that with the step increase and coming off of some of those one-time stipends. The bulk of this year's efforts is around that second bullet, which is identifying redundancies and efficiencies in the administration and the central office. We presented to you on Monday about 187 net position cut. We'll have that more detailed out and what was the reduction, what was added back. But that netted about 20 million in savings. Overall, if we back out the increases to the central office, including the textbook adoption and the annualized cost of the ERP, the central office is down about 30 million. And that's even with increases to state health and that step increase. For reviewing the school-based program investments, we did use a zero-based piloting process for schools to build out their signature and turnaround budgets. That allowed us to target dollars more based and aligned on need with each of the schools. And the signature program allocation, we did hold back $3 million of that as potential reserve. We've worked with the chief of schools to release that. They're currently working with cluster superintendents to identify a process that schools will then leverage, principals will then leverage to petition for those dollars to support specific needs in their signature program allocations. So around maximizing and adjusting existing investments, we'll bring you details of that and the tentative adoption materials. Aligning on a base school allocation for every school, we are able to show now what their earnings would be had we built their budgets using a traditional allocation model. So every school is now able to show what their base allocation is, and we are able to determine where they have leveraged flexibility as school leaders and go teams from that base allocation. The board has adopted a position on House Bill 581 to opt out, which helped us in closing that initial budget gap by about 20 million and aligning the current and multi-year budget. This is the first year of the process around facility master planning. So far, what we have done is secure the vendor that we'll be using for the facilities master planning process, and we're working now to develop that task force and kick off the targeted support meetings. All right. Any further questions, next steps for tentative adoption? I will just say this is a great opportunity for feedback and what you would like to see us bring to tentative. So I heard a request for more in-depth analysis of fund balance. If there's any other information or details that you want to make sure we're including in that tentative adoption materials, we can make sure that we include that.
So one of the line items was continuing to seek grant-funded opportunities, and I just am curious how much we can project and anticipate. I know, like last year, for instance, we paid out of fund balance for school lunches, and I know that there are some funding opportunities specifically in those spaces, and so I'd be interested in more information on like the projections and plans around some of the grant-funded resources.
Yeah, grants, and what I'm also hearing is partnerships and where we can leverage that.
And on that, I guess I see when we talk about grant funding opportunities and federal funds, how are we going to be able to project? And I know we don't have a crystal ball, but just considering the current landscape, just taking that into account, how we're going to have to be more reliant on general fund.
Yeah, and what I've told, so I've been in a variety of meetings. What I've told parents, community that have asked those questions is the best way we can prepare is to be sustainable and fiscally strong and fiscally nimble, so that whatever happens, we're able to provide some continuity in our programming going forward. And that's where we focus on building back up that strong fund balance and making sure that our central office is lean as possible. And it will be a part of the conversation we need to have around facility master planning as well. Just making sure that we are strong financially and that we're able to weather whatever unknowns come up over the next few years.
Absolutely. Ken?
Yeah, just two quick things that are probably already, these might be redundant, you may already be working these into the discussion. The first is you've made some really tough decisions in the central office and really calling that out. I've heard Dr. Johnson talk about 187 positions, $20 million. I don't know where those numbers, I know you're still sorting through the paperwork there, but I think naming that and taking, because I think that's something that was hard work and was important. And then and really the other side of that that investments at the school level have increased. It's not always clear because there have been some difficult decisions at the school level around positions, but some of that is because of the salary investments in the past. But just even on a raw dollar number, I think it's compelling to say more money is going to the schools than was last year. Now, we can talk about how that money was allocated, but at least as at a top line number to make that clear. You're probably working this stuff in, but I think those are some key talking points that I've heard questions from and I've been using in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. That is helpful. And the work up until we get to this point is building the budget. The next month is building the narrative, right? So that's where we really start working on our budget book. We start working with communications. We start working on preparing for those engagement community meetings that we will have in May, where we really start telling the story of the budget that we've built for next year. And so that's very helpful for us to include.
And did you say, to Ken's point around central office, did you say 30 million so far? But that's inclusive of,
The 30 million is net, the textbooks that we're recommending to move forward to this year. So if you just look at that department budget, that you won't see that there. But it is also net the increases in state health and in the STEP increase. So STEP is about 2.53% on top of existing salary schedules. And the state health benefits is up around 20% for classified employees, most of which are in your central office. And the TRS is an additional 1.3% of salary. I know those sound like small percentages, but when your salary is $500 million, that's a huge chunk. So all of that adds up in your budget.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. With that, I will hand it off to our special revenue teams to present their budgets. Just as a reminder, I mentioned it when I kicked off, but about 30% of your overall budget is in this sheet here. And so it's in your title grants, it's in some of your state grants and state funded allocations beyond the QBE allocation, SPLOST, which is your special purpose local option sales tax allocations, nutrition, and then also your 4.5 million for student activity funds that while we don't necessarily control, those are at the school budgets, we are required to approve those as part of your overall budget. And so I think first up is our title fund.
Good morning. I'm going to kick us off with Title I, which is to improve, really to provide supplemental funding to improve the academic achievement of all students, especially those who are economically disadvantaged. Primarily, our allocation is projected at roughly 28 million. Primarily, about 23 million of that goes towards school-based allocations, and that includes our traditional schools as well as our charter partner schools. In addition to our school-based allocations, we do have a couple other required set-asides. We are required to earmark money for homeless students. Through that allocation, we fund 3 positions. We plan to fund a homeless foster care liaison, an accounting assistant, and a transportation routing specialist to ensure that those students receive targeted service. Our second required set-aside is for our neglected and delinquent students who attend our neglected and delinquent institution. And through that allocation, we will facilitate a transition coordinator, and that person has been tasked with ensuring successful and smooth transitions for their students in and out of the facility. Also, through our Title I allocation, we will be funding 4 family engagement liaisons, and they are to improve and support the family engagement initiatives, school-based and district-wide, that are required by Title I. We will also fund an MTSS coordinator to support the implementation of multi-tiered systems of support district-wide. We also earmark money for our Power Up summer program, as well as Everyday Labs, which is an attendance intervention.
Now I'll go over Title II, and so that really focuses on professional development. So we are going to focus on professional development all through the school year and also through the summer for teachers and school leaders. We also are focusing this year on endorsement programs for math, reading, science, ESOL, and gifted. And we also do provide higher incentives for special education and CTAE with Title II funds. Title II, the purpose is to provide access to well-rounded education to support health and safety. And the initiatives that we'll focus on this year for upcoming year for FY26. One, we are transferring Title IV, which we also did last year, this year into Title I, and that's about 1.3 million of the allocation into Title I to support our Title I schools. We're also going to continue with our CEP, which is for the arts, and we provide transportation for that program, and this is actually the 20th year that's coming up. We also support Everyday Labs for the non-title schools. There are 2 MTSS coordinators that will also support district-wide support, 1 foster care liaison, and a multilingual coordinator. Any
Waiting for Title IV. Anyone have any questions right now? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Right, great, thank you. And now IDEA.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Tina Love, this is our fiscal manager, Elaine Stevens. And so we are presenting our IDA. And so as you will see that we practically remained the same. We are not making, the state's not providing any additional funding. They want to remain flat for this year. We do have 2 reductions in IDA flow through and disproportionality. And those are primarily due to our carryover deduction for decrease due to salary increase. So normally we would have more funding to pay over, but because we have salary increase, that and so with that, our funding primarily goes to our teachers and salaries for our staff members. And as you know, as I presented on Monday, we have had continued increases in the needs for staffing and personnel. And then also our preschool staffing continues to increase, their needs continue as well. We do have 2 parent mentors that work part-time. They are housed at the hub. And so those parent mentors provide assistance to students, families of needs as and then we do have to point out our disproportionality. We do currently have 9 disproportionality specialists that are supporting our school. We do remain significantly disproportionate in identification and also our exclusionary days or and so those positions will continue to support our primarily gen ed population from transitioning, provide support instructionally and or otherwise from transitioning into
So is the decrease around disproportionality also in relation to the increases in salaries?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I've often had a question about IDA that we have, and it's important to make these investments for kids, but it's also important to avoid due process claims. So if I'm doing the math right, we're given a step column for all these folks, but the allocation is staying the same. So there is an encroachment on general fund to keep these positions. Is that right? I mean, do we have to contribute more money? If the funding is stable, then, but folks are getting a step and count, benefit increases, so we are paying for that out of the general fund to subsidize these
Yes,
positions.
that is correct.
And so how is there any, which is the right thing to do, is there any sense of how, and maybe this is a conversation for another day, but I would hate to, if we've had to make any cuts here, have we made any cuts here, or is this the same profile or portfolio that we've had?
Of staff,
Yeah,
so it's primarily the same. We have made some reductions in our district level supports in their number of days, so they're going from annual to 32, I think. So we've tried to encumber some of that transition there, but primarily staffing or otherwise in the central office has remained flat. In schools, though, we've had to have.
okay. I just know there's a lot of tension between, obviously, we want to keep our encroachment down, but at the same time, we don't have to pay in due process claims or in other costs that maybe hit the legal side of the bill, but don't necessarily live here.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you guys keeping an eye on how those claims are proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you. We're next. Oh. Okay.
Thank you. Early learning.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, colleagues, and community at large. I am Joy Bradley, and I'm here today to present the grant funding for Georgia Pre-K that provides our state lottery funding for operations of our pre-K programming, which totals estimately about $6 million. Our federally funded program, Head Start, that supports our wraparound services for 21 pre-K programs, that is estimated at about $900,000, as well as our United Way transition funding that supports salaries, mini grants, Kinder Camp, and other initiatives related to school readiness, which is a grant of $305,000. And so for each of these, as you can see, the summary of the 5-year trend, it's the same funding level that we will receive for the upcoming school year, and there aren't any changes to our program for next year. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I do have one. So the United Way Collaborative, that's great seeing that we've had that increase. How is that money spent? I mean, what is the focus of that money?
So in the United Way Collaborative, that focuses on transition, and so it's used for salary, our early learning transition specialist. It provides funding for our Kinder Camp programming in the summer, for all of our birth to 3 efforts, as well as through the partnership with Gears, our mini grants.
Do we know how many locations it supports, or how many students or to-be students it serves, or children?
Yes, so we have a collaborative of early learning centers, and so the total of children and families, as well as educator providers, last year there was a total, it's about 2,000 that averages each year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Loretta?
So can you talk to me a little bit about how the Georgia Pre-K, like how that grant is funded? Because I see it, there's big fluctuation from 21 to 26. So, and I'm just curious if you could provide some insight there.
Yes, so the Georgia Pre-K funding is based on teachers' credibility of years of service, as well as teacher credentials, and then the number of children that are enrolled within Atlanta Public Schools pre-K program. So more than likely in 2021, enrollment may have been lower, and so that's how the funding is received.
So basically, we drive the funding, they don't give it, and then we figure it out. It's based on our count.
Yes, so it's based on the number of children that's enrolled.
Okay, thank
And
you.
so to further that, what happens is, they have quarterly checkpoints for rosters. And so we update the rosters of the number of children that's enrolled, and that's how the funding is received.
And is there a cap?
So we have spaces for 1,108 students. So we're paid for 1,108.
Okay, so there is a cap, and that is what
Yes,
it is. Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Sorry, my microphone was on.
All right, good afternoon. I'd like to go through our capital expenditures. First one up is SPLOST, eSPLOST, to be more precise, which is the revenue fund, Fund 586, which is for our access property. So, as you know, we have more than 40 or 50 properties that are access that we're not using. So we do get about $2.1 million annually of lease revenues. And then we are now using those for the maintenance, repair, and utility costs or any upkeep for all of the excess property. So it's a portfolio of our revenues from those that are used then to pay for those expenditures. We have a 70% increase because of the $2.1 million from this current fiscal year. 1.4 million is going to roll over, which our goal is to increase that budget every year. And that's how we get to the $3.5 million. And again, the goal is that we don't use any general fund for any type of maintenance, repair, or utility costs for these excess properties. Any questions? Loss, Fund 300 or Fund 5?
We do have some questions. Could you remind, mainly the public, where we are with SPLOST? Like the timeline, and of course, we're in the midst of resetting our goals and our strategic plan and the facilities master planning, like how that ties in with eSPLOST.
Sure. So we are embarking on a facilities master plan that will take between now and the remainder of this calendar year to prepare for the next SPLOST, which is SPLOST 2027. So SPLOST 2022 funds have been allocated already for all of those funds. And so our facilities master planning process will be looking at the right sizing of our schools and be looking at where improvements that we need for three facilities area directors, and they each have a certain number of those properties. They go out there, it's either weekly or bi-weekly, to go and check where, if there's any graffiti or any other type of needs that are be done, and then we go and address it using.
Okay, and then one additional question is, can this bucket of funds be used for all things kind of associated within here? So recently, we approved an amount of money for someone to consult in the space of real estate. Like, does that sit here, or does that come from a different fund? Or the facilities master planning contract that we're about to have someone help us do that, does that come from this fund, or is that just trying to see what type of flexibility there is there?
Well, there is flexibility with the fund. But the master planning effort came from our SPLOST account. And I stood up to say something, and I lost.
We were talking about monitoring the properties and the process
Yes.
for raising the. Okay.
Yes, as Dan mentioned, those properties fall within the areas of several of his directors. But we also have the excess properties on the patrols or the routes of the safety or the SRO teams as well. So they should be visiting those properties as well.
Thank you for that, and thank you for any time that I have reached out when someone has raised their hand to tell me about something. You guys have usually been pretty quick about tending to that, so I want to thank you for that.
But real quick, on excess properties, does this amount cover the costs to that would be a no, to maintain those excess properties? Do we know that cost, and are we actively evaluating that cost?
Yeah, it does cover our costs for right now.
For right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
for maintenance, repair, utility costs, it does cover it. Yes.
Thank you. Ken?
Dan, come on. Look, you can't, you ball, calls strike, you can't can't take first base. Couple quick things. On slide 16, this one, yeah. The growth here has been astounding. I mean, the going from 50 to 142 to 370 to 413. Is this just a function of the economic activity in Atlanta? Is that what I'm seeing here?
So what you're seeing there,
Should we be,
I
should we
would-
be nervous? Like, and I run nervous, so
Well,
I'm
yeah,
okay to
and-
hear
and-
it.
And
but-
we're still a little nervous. Don't get me wrong, because you're right. It looks good on one side, but we're still struggling to bring projects in, even though we've had increased revenue, to bring projects in on budget and on schedule because, or on under budget, because of you know, the inflation that we're experiencing on the upcharges for construction labor.
Yeah, and tariffs probably don't help either, but not to state the obvious. I defer the balance of my time.
Great questions. Thank you all.
So good afternoon. I'm here to talk about the nutrition budget. So our total amount is roughly over 41 million. We're seeing a decrease year on year of 6%, roughly about 2.7 million. A lot of the 6% overall decrease is a result of decrease in FTEs, going from about 450 to 437. We have some decreases in non-personnel spend. Also, the nutrition program will continue the same model of continuing to just advance the program, implement some new things, but as far as how the money would be used, it's the same as we'll be using it in we're using in FY 25. And when I use the FTE counts, we're usually doing that through attrition. So as we're in this year, as we're looking at meal counts and staff and being efficient, that's how we're moving. So it's not like someone in a school base is losing a job because of the loss of an FTE. It's more through attrition. So I'll take any questions you have about nutrition.
I think you just answered our question with that last comment, so thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, and lastly, our school activity funds. These are basically just bank accounts at each of the schools. They are controlled and monitored by the school principals. They support specific clubs at those schools. They are student-generated typically based on receipts for athletics, co-curriculars, extracurriculars. There is a requirement that you adopt and maintain financials for these, even though they are controlled at the school level. And we do report to you on a quarterly basis the actual collections and spend for these. The last time you saw this report out was in February. Right now, we are recommending approximately 4.5. That's what we've been bringing to you in the last few years, and we tend to hit right around that. And so, if there's no questions,
I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
Retta.
So I have a question about that, and this might not be the right venue, but I have a wondering in this space, and that is, are there any grant opportunities to help in this space? Oftentimes, we're hearing about the frustrations on a school level, independent student level, in terms of a desire to want to participate in some of these activities, but not necessarily having the funds. Now, I am 51, but when I went to school, I remember, and it was a different district, that I was able to participate in school activities without coming out of the pocket. Granted, it was an old dusty uniform, but I was still able to participate. So there's a wondering here if there's any opportunity for grants or partnerships to support some of our more vulnerable students.
Sure, and you said the word that I wrote down, which is the partnerships. And so this is an area where we continue to think collaboratively with our partnerships office around where we can target those partnerships to schools that may not be able to generate as much in their school activity funds as other schools. And so that's an area we'll continue to lean in.
Thank you.
Just to add real quickly, we know that work is happening, but we have a hard time seeing what the
report
plan
out
is
of
and the
that.
strategy.
Yeah.
And also, I know this has been the same number the past few years, but how many years has it been?
It's been around
4.5?
4.5 forever, and it could be as low as 3, as high as 5. It really does depend more on participation at the schools than what we would project from our level. So it can vary a lot, but we typically do a budget for it, and this 4.5 tends to be about right. I think one year we went up to like 5, and then COVID hit and participation took a nosedive, right? And so now we're back up to closer to 4.5.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no other questions. Next steps. So we are at the final sprint of this marathon. We will be bringing to you for tentative adoption the school budgets, the department budgets, the remainder of the general fund, all of special revenue, SPLOST, nutrition, and student activity funds for tentative adoption on May 5th. From there, we will hold 2 community engagement sessions. We have found that virtual works better for budget conversations or when we do push in to existing meetings. And so we plan to hold those 2 Tuesdays in a row, one on May 6th at 6 p.m. and another on May 13th at 6:30. The way that these typically roll is I will use the first part of it for education, just kind of doing the deep dive for those who may not plug into Budget Commission. So a lot of it is rehashing what we've talked about at every Budget Commission meeting leading up to this point, a lot of details of how we got to the final budget. But then we do open it up for engagement, so questions, feedback from anybody who wants to weigh in on the budget. That is incorporated into our recommendations, including any final feedback we'll get from the board at the Budget Commission meeting on May 15th. I mentioned on Monday that or Tuesday at the board meeting that we've given central office a second round of opportunities. There are still reductions, conversations around reorganizations that we will try to capture by that May 15th meeting, and all of those will be incorporated into your final adoption on June 2nd. The millage process always is contingent on when we receive that Fulton County and DeKalb County digest. The last few years, it has moved forward a bit. We've been able to do some of that in July and August. And so we'll keep you posted as we plan out what those millage hearings and millage process may look like for this year. And with that, I'll take any final questions you have. The next Budget Commission meeting is scheduled for May 15th.
I know Ken has a question, but before we get to his question, for the public, with the meetings, can they find that on the budget website, and do they sign up? What are the
Budget
details?
website, we typically work to put that on the tentative calendar as well. I think we have flyers that are going out through communications. So we'll be spreading that as much as possible through the venues that we have available to us.
Great, and we'll help spread the word. Ken?
Yeah, thank you for this, Dr. Bracken, as always, very thorough. I know some of my community members have been reaching out. I appreciate you taking the time and talking to them and walking them through some of the detail here. HB 581, do we have, is that, what's the prospect of that? I don't see that on this calendar. What's that looking like?
So we got approval today. We did get the letter back from the Secretary of State that we're done. We've completed that process. And
For
we're
this
approved
current cycle?
for opting out of HB 581. Now there's a new bill.
Right.
I think that one's 92. I'm gonna get the number wrong, but that's the zombie bill of House Bill 581, which says that we will go through this process again for at least one more year. It also includes some additional information that will go on the tax bills, including, I don't know what actually made it into the final legislation. I need to read through that, but it was proposed at one point that our fund balance would be on there, that our phone number would be on there, that there would be different, Ken's phone number would be on the tax bill.
Please, I think they already have it.
So, I mean, I'll put together, I can work with the team to make sure that you have the briefs on that and your board briefs. But we will have to go through additional conversations to continue to opt out. We have an opportunity to opt back in, I think is the language that was used for that. But I think just one more year. And so we have to go through the hearings one more time, and then we can move.
What was the new bill number that?
I think it's 92, but I need.
Okay.
Is it 92?
92.
House Bill 92.
And I may ask you to come to our community, to a community meeting and.
Happy to do it.
At the end of May.
Happy
Thank you.
to do it.
Thank you, Ken. Jessica?
So Ken mentioned kind of community feedback. I know one of the areas that we've been hearing a lot about is just, even though the schools receive more, high schools particularly felt a pinch this year. And thank you. I know you shared some direct communication with people that have asked about the IB formulas and some of those calculations. And so just wanting you to share some of that and what we can look forward to in future years, because I think the high schools particularly we're kind of grappling with this or that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So overall, you can see at the top of this screen, on average, our traditional schools received about 8% more than they did the previous year. So additional funding went to the schools. But you can see that more of that additional funding went to the elementary schools, a little less of that additional funding went to the middle schools, and the smallest amount of additional funding went to high schools, which does pinch their flexibility, right? So, but what's driving this allocation is the budget parameter around ensuring a certain baseline of allocation for every school. So when we look here, I think it was the 5th parameter for expenditure parameters. We did implement a process this year where we went and rebuilt all of the school-based allocations using a more traditional funding formula that you would have found at APS prior to moving to our school student success funding formula, looking at formulas benchmarked against some of our neighboring districts. And what we saw from that review of the school-based allocations is that we were underfunding elementary through the SSF allocation. And so the redistribution of additional funds was to drive more to our elementary so that more of our schools could afford that base allocation through the student success funding formula. And we saw that we had been overfunding high school. So basically, another way of saying this is all of our schools have received a certain allocation, and they've received a certain buffer on top of that they could use for flexibility in their budgets. High schools were experiencing historically more buffer, more flexibility than our elementary and middles. And so what we did through this look at the allocations for all schools is to make sure that there's more of a consistent flexibility and buffer between what the base allocation is and what schools can actually leverage. So we did see some of those trade-off conversations at high schools as we pulled back some of that additional flexible funding that they had. Going forward, we believe that we've right-sized that allocation now, that through this process we've determined what that base should be. So I'm not recommending any additional shifts between the grade levels. What we will see as we go forward is additional recommendations of how we are supporting smaller schools. You saw some of that this year as we started coming off of that small school supplement, and we will continue to have to look at that small school supplement as more and more of our schools and programming becomes expensive when you look at it from a per pupil level.
Thank you for that explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bracken and team, and everyone who attended today's meeting. A lot of really important information, and appreciate members of the commission and other colleagues being here and asking great questions. With that, I know we need to ask about public comment. Do we have any? All right. I can't believe Marshall's not here again. We'll send him a note and tell him we missed him to put it in writing. I'm sure we'll get those questions soon, which we appreciate, as well as questions from other members of the public, and look forward to the 2 meetings coming up to hear additional feedback. So our next Budget Commission meeting is May 15th, and then at that point we will talk about changes between the tentative and final adoption. So are there any other questions, comments? Great. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Hey.